Hi guys, welcome back or welcome to Switch to Life, and in today's video we are going to be reviewing one of Illumination's weirdest movies, that of course being Minions and Monsters, which is the third Minions movie and the seventh Despicable Me movie overall. And to be honest, I just found it extremely weird. I've heard a lot of reviews online that give a lot of positive feedback for this, and to that I say, well, yeah, sure, there's plenty of humor. There's a lot of references to 1920s filmmaking, which I personally loved, and there's also a ton of references to the Despicable Me franchise, especially in the end credits, by the way. But what I found to be lacking was the overall story of the film, mostly because, well, that will be a very heavy spoiler, and we'll get into that at the end of the review. But for some reason, I did not like this movie, and we'll get more into that later. But for now, I just want to talk about the animation quality. Honestly, I wouldn't say that while the animation is good, it's not Illumination's best. That right still goes to the Mario movies. And as for the voice acting, well, they got a bunch of A-list voice actors, but honestly, I hardly recognized any of them. And for the most part, it kind of seems like all of those actors were just reading lines off of a script and not really portraying their characters. Granted, I will say Max as a filmmaking director in this movie was really good with his voice cast. And of course, Pierre Coffin playing the voice of hundreds of Minions was really good. And not to mention Trey Parker, who played Goomy. He put on a really fun, unique voice, but everybody else was kind of just there, especially when it comes to the other monsters. And as for the music, well, shockingly, I would say the music is probably one of the best parts of this film. The music is really good, and honestly, I wouldn't expect anything less from composer John Powell. Yes, John Powell, the writer of the How to Train Your Dragon music, as well as many other animated movies, made the soundtrack for this, and it's honestly really good what he managed to do, especially because it added so much humor to the film. But with that, it's time to dive into the story. So the movie starts in the present day with a group of kids and some adults having a tour of a Hollywood museum, and among some really important and iconic statues like Keanu Reeves representing the Matrix and George Lucas locked inside of a cage to represent himself, as well as a bunch of other Universal films that are referenced in this museum, we get to see two statues of a couple minions, Henry and James. Understandably, nobody has actually heard of these two minions, but according to the tour guide, they are responsible for saving Hollywood during its golden age. So we start off the movie by introducing that there are many different tribes of minions, which explains why this is a completely different tribe and why they're not in the ice cave compared to the other minions, which probably means that there was a minion tribe who did serve Hitler. Then again, the director confirmed that wasn't the case, so I don't know. Anyway, the tour guide explains that James is a creative kind of minion, and unfortunately, the rest of the minions aren't. They are more focused on bananas and finding the biggest, baddest villain to serve, which in this case involves a Cyclops. Unfortunately, James ends up using his creativity to make some Legos, and when the Cyclops steps on one, it nearly kills him. So despite being severely injured by the Legos, he unfortunately fires every single one of the minions, which makes it so that they're all mad at James, except for one, Henry, who just found the whole thing super funny and how the Cyclops was freaking out after stepping on the Lego. So the two become best friends, and after a while, the minions find a new master to serve in a dark wizard with an evil spell book that can summon monsters, basically the whole premise of the movie. And after summoning a pink bunny monster, which ends up killing the wizard, Henry and James work together to put the monster back inside the book. And while it does work, the rest of the minions are still mad at them over the fact they released the monster and killed their new master. Except for one, Ed, who is hard of hearing and speaks in sign language, and because of that, Henry and James basically formed a new trio with Ed. Now, one thing I don't like about this is that when they talk to Goomy and introduce themselves, Goomy already knows sign language, which is really weird considering he was stuck in a book for eons. Maybe even though he was in the book, he could still look out into the outside world, and with Ed carrying him for a few centuries, I guess that's how he learned sign language, but I don't know. Ed secretly grabs the monster's book, and then they just go around finding new masters to serve until eventually Dick, the leader of the minion tribe, is just so frustrated with Henry and James that he makes them camp out, and then he tells them to do some chores, and then Henry gets mad, and Ed tries to calm things down before getting mad himself and punching Dick, and then it's a free-for-all until the minions see a bandit that is robbing a train. So the minions go after the bandit only to find out that the bandit is an actor and the train scene is a scene that they're filming in a movie. And, well, after ruining the shot, according to the director Max, they are basically just exiled from the film. But unfortunately, because of the budget for the film, they can't do a reshoot of the scene. And eventually they have to find a workaround to include the minions in the film. And after showing a rough draft expecting to be fired by his employers, the Bright brothers, who are in charge of the movie studio he's working for, they decide that they like the minions and their funny antics on the silent film, so they want the minions to be back and become actors in all of Max's films. So when he finds the minions and talks to them about making movies, James is super excited because he's able to express his creativity through stories in filmmaking. Over the next few years, they make a few films, and the minions as actors are praised and become extremely famous overnight. Now, honestly, I'm a little shocked at how much the world loves the minions in this movie because I just didn't understand it. And then something did happen that put it all in perspective. See, the minions are funny, and when you're focused on comedy movies that rely on slapstick humor, that is what makes a good movie. That's what makes the minions awesome.
That was perfect!
But as soon as they introduced sound into the film industry, that's when the minions lost their edge.
Oh, Humphrey. Piñata. Carbonara. Lasagna.
Because they have annoying voices and can't speak English, and they have a hard time expressing emotion because of it, they can't be actors in sound movies. And because everybody is focused on doing sound-related movies, that means that the minions are fired. So without a studio budget to back them, now James and Henry have to find a way to make movies on their own. And unfortunately, well, Dick, the leader of the minion tribe, is completely against this to the point where he lashes out and even whacks Greg with a stick, flattening him. And, I mean, Greg is fine, but he's still short at the end of the movie. Eventually getting tired of Henry and James, the entire minion tribe decide to leave them and Ed behind to focus on their creative dreams or whatever. And so Dick leads the rest of the minions to find a new master, and eventually they find one in a robot named Dort from outer space. I mean, it's either that or a human who cosplays as a robot from outer space because, well, I like how limber this robotic guy is. But unfortunately, he acts like a human, talks like a human, and sure, while he talks about how he was going to take over the world and how humanity is enslaved to his species, I'm pretty sure it's all just an act, right? But as he's getting ready to take over the world, he interacts with a girl named Debbie. Now keep in mind, this takes place during the 1920s, so she's actually out there fighting for women to get the right to vote. And many other rights, of course. But also, as she gets to know Dort, she sees that he thinks humanity is one and the same, in that both men and women are equally enslaved to his alien species. But he also learns to respect Debbie and her opinion, which I thought was really good. Which is very disappointing to Dick, but let's move on back to the A plot, where Henry and James come up with the idea of minions and monsters. They go over to Max, their former director, who reads their script and says, "This is a great film, but do you guys have equipment, a crew? What are you going to use for your monster?" And eventually he decides to hand over his old camera to James and say that it's a gift, and he knows that James is going to do great things. But without a monster, James still can't make his movie until Ed pulls out the monster summoning book that they got from the wizard. So they try to summon a monster, and instead they summon a cute little green baby.
I'm Gary Orcam Oliver Magma Ichabod the Deceiver, but my friends just call me Goomy for short.
Now, Gumi is extremely smart, and his name, the Deceiver, heavily implies that he's gonna be a twist villain, which, it's not much of a twist, you know? But he says he knows where they can get a couple of monsters, so they travel to an ice glacier, on the way scaring a shark, and then once they thaw out a couple monsters, Philip and Howard, they make their way back to Hollywood, and on the way, all Philip and Howard do is complain about how they want to eat people and smash people and take over people. And eventually, that's when Gumi pulls them aside and says they have a secret plan. They are going to help James make his movie, and during the filming, they're going to summon Irene, which is a gelatinous monster with a bunch of eyes that has the capability to destroy the entire planet by eating everything in sight. Unfortunately, Henry overhears the plan, and this begins a monster chase sequence, which is extremely funny because of the 1920s piano music and the slow frame rate that just makes this a 1920s comedy film. But then, unfortunately, Henry gets captured by the monsters, and then Gumi and the monsters work together with James to make the movie set. And when they finish, Gumi says that Henry went to grab some supplies, and he thought, what if they summoned a brand new monster, and then Henry could offer himself up as a sacrifice in the movie for the monster to help build the stakes of the movie. Except what's really happening is that they're going to feed Henry to Irene once they summon her, and then Irene is going to take over the whole world. And since Henry is playing the distressed victim, he's trying to tell James that it's a trap, but he can't get that across. And so then Irene is summoned, and when that happens, she attacks the city. Henry manages to escape, only to later be eaten by Irene, but thankfully James manages to catch on to this, and then he uses a truck to drive into Irene and rescue Henry. Which, I'm a little confused. I thought the minions were immortal, and apparently Henry is drowning. But we've also seen plenty of instances where the minions are out in space with no mask whatsoever, and they're breathing just fine. So clearly it's not oxygen deprivation. The way I see it, Henry would have been able to just survive however long he needed to inside of Irene. But thankfully James manages to use a truck to get him out. And while all that's going on, Dort and Debbie are out on their dates when they see their fellow minions in trouble, and Dick tries to get Dort to help, and Dort flees back to his apartment. And at first I'm like, okay, so Dort is officially a human who has absolutely no purpose in being a supervillain. But then we get to his apartment and there's a strange blue glow. Yeah, apparently Dort wasn't lying when he said that his apartment is just an alien spaceship disguised as a human apartment. So he gathers an army of spaceships with the minions flying tiny spaceships, and they use some super cool lasers to destroy Irene, turning all of her gelatinous mass into stone and killing her. And while that's going on, Gumi ends up dropping the monster book, so Henry James managed to use the monster book to trap Gumi and the other monsters of Philip and Howard inside of the book, ending the monster apocalypse and saving Hollywood. And what's made even better is that Ed, who, because he's hard of hearing, had no idea that this was all fake, ended up filming the entire thing. So, with a few months of reshoots and editing, they finally managed to broadcast the film Minions y Monstras. And that's when James gets an Oscar, his lifelong dream ever since he first heard of movie making. And that's when the tour guide ends by basically saying it's because of James and Henry that we have monster movies as well as soundless films. But keep in mind that everything, and I mean everything, that I have said up to this point did not actually happen. The final minute of the movie reveals that this whole movie was just a movie made by James and Henry. Yes, even the tour guide sequences, everything. The Cyclops was an actor, the Wizard was an actor, but at least it does explain why this meat puppet managed to get its head chopped off without there being a lot of blood. And the monsters were just giant props except for Goomy, who was a little kid in a costume. Well, I mean, I think he's a little kid. We never actually see them take off the costume. Same thing with the Cyclops, but it would make too much sense, right? So yeah, honestly, I did not like this movie in the slightest just because of that one last minute. For the most part, I thought the movie was pretty good, but as soon as the last minute played, it automatically went to the bottom of my Illumination tier list. And it's made even worse by the end credits because, well, they try to bring in some Despicable Me references, and the very first scene that we see is that James and Henry use the magic monster book, which shouldn't really be magical if this is the case, and they use it to turn a normal dog into Kyle. Kyle, who is this weird freakish dog that Gru has ever since before he met the Minions. So how the heck could Kyle have been Gru's pet as a monster dog before meeting the Minions if the Minions turned him into the monster dog? It makes no sense whatsoever. This is why I hate the Minions and Monsters movie. Oh, and for those of you who are wondering, Agnes does make an appearance in this movie, which is just so cute. But yeah, honestly, I'm just left questioning what's even the point of this movie. I know it was just a cash grab spin-off, but there was some kind of message, right? No, it was literally just thrown together to give people some humor and some references to filmmaking, which I admit I loved all those aspects, and I loved the animation and the music, but the actual story itself left a lot to be desired even before it was revealed that the story was fake. And honestly, I don't even know what the point of including Philip and Howard was, because even though they were really cool monsters with some great voices and designs, they kind of just did nothing aside from help Goomy catch Henry and unleash Irene. Even in the final battle, they still didn't do anything. Now, I tried to give this movie a fair assessment despite my critique of it being a movie in a movie. And after a week of gathering my thoughts, I realized even aside from that, this movie just had a lot of flaws to the point where it is still my least favorite Illumination movie ever made. And it doesn't help with all of the naughty stuff that is included for the adults and for the kids, especially when it comes to monster butts. And for the first time ever, we see a minion fully naked from the front. And they don't really have anything there. In fact, they censored it for the trailer, but there's nothing there to censor. So yeah, that is my opinion on Minions and Monsters. But what did you guys think of this movie? Be sure to leave your thoughts down below in the comment section. And of course, if you want to help support the channel, please make sure that you like and subscribe. But above all else, make sure that you're staying safe out there. And I will see you all in my next video. Bye bye.